I'm Alyssa, 33 years old, and I've always been the one in my family who takes charge. My younger sister Samantha has always been a free spirit, a little reckless, a little unpredictable. Samantha had her daughter Bella when she was only 19. From the start, our parents were worried about how Samantha would handle motherhood. They did their best to support her, but it was clear early on that she wasn't prepared for the responsibility. Watching all of this unfold, I found myself stepping into a role I didn't anticipate. Bella and I formed a bond quickly. By the time she was 3, I was the one taking her to school events, piano recitals, and even soccer practices when Samantha was either too busy or canceled at the last minute. I became her safety net, a consistent presence in her life. I loved Bella fiercely, but I couldn't ignore the weight of the responsibility I was taking on. Samantha's life was a whirlwind of instability, changing jobs frequently, entering and leaving relationships, and occasionally disappearing for weeks when things got tough. During those times, Bella would stay with me or our parents. I could see the strain this was putting on her, but what could I do? Samantha didn't want help, and any suggestion that she needed it was met with anger or denial. When Bella was 6, I finally broached the idea of her living with me full-time. It wasn't an easy conversation. I just wanted Bella to have some stability. Samantha, however, was furious. She accused me of trying to take her child away and rejected the suggestion outright. After that, our relationship grew strained, but I couldn't step away from Bella. She needed me, even if her mother couldn't see it. As the years passed, not much changed with Samantha. She cycled through jobs and boyfriends, and Bella continued to rely on me for the steadiness her mom couldn't provide. By the time Bella was 12, her struggles were more visible. She started withdrawing, her grades slipped, and she no longer seemed interested in the things she once loved. It was heartbreaking to see her light dim like that. I brought up the idea of adoption again, thinking it might be the best solution for Bella. This time, Samantha shut me out entirely. For months, she refused to speak to me. She called me a thief and a meddler, claiming I was trying to undermine her role as Bella's mother. But I wasn't trying to take something from her. I just wanted to give Bella the stability she desperately needed. Despite the fallout, I stayed close to Bella. She'd come over to my place often, sometimes just to talk or escape the tension at home. I tried to suggest therapy for her, thinking it might help her navigate everything, but Samantha dismissed the idea as unnecessary and expensive. Watching Bella struggle while being unable to fully help her was one of the hardest things I'd ever experienced. By the time Bella was a teenager, her reliance on me had only grown. She'd call late at night or ask to stay over, just to get some space from the chaos at home. But the closer she grew to me, the more the tension between her and Samantha seemed to worsen. Their fights became more frequent, with Samantha dismissing Bella's pain as mere rebellion. I became Bella's confidant, the person she could trust when everything else felt uncertain. I couldn't stop worrying about her, but every attempt to step in felt like I was crossing an invisible line. Family members began weighing in too. Some said I should let Samantha handle her parenting no matter how flawed it was. Others whispered that Bella might be better off with me. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't keep standing by, watching Bella fade into the background of her own life. As Bella entered her teen years, the cracks in Samantha's parenting became impossible to ignore. Bella was 14 when the school first called me, not her mom, about her declining attendance. I wasn't even listed as her primary contact, but the staff must have realized they'd have better luck reaching me. They told me Bella had been missing classes and that her once decent grades were slipping fast. Hearing it from them made my stomach drop. When I tried to talk to Samantha about it, she dismissed my concerns. "It's just a phase," she said with a wave of her hand, as if Bella skipping class and barely turning in homework was nothing more than teenage rebellion. She even accused me of coddling Bella, claiming I was the reason she wasn't toughening up. Every time I tried to help, Samantha acted like I was undermining her. She refused to see what was right in front of her. Bella was struggling, emotionally and mentally, and it wasn't just a phase. It was like screaming into the void. Samantha had built walls around herself, and nothing I said could get through. Meanwhile, Bella was pulling away from everyone. She stopped talking to Samantha entirely unless it was to argue. She stopped smiling and spent hours holed up in her room or wandering around aimlessly. I'd invite her over to my house as often as I could. She'd sit on my couch in silence, scrolling through her phone or staring blankly at the TV. Then one day I saw her social media posts. They weren't direct cries for help, but the things she wrote about feeling unseen, trapped, and like she didn't belong hit me like a gut punch. I didn't know she felt that way, not to that extent. I brought it up to Samantha, hoping it might open her eyes. Instead, it only made things worse. She accused me of invading Bella's privacy and stirring up drama, brushing it off as nothing more than attention-seeking behavior. Her denial was suffocating. I felt helpless, like I was watching Bella drown while Samantha refused to throw her a lifeline. I tried to do what I could, talking to Bella, keeping her close, but it never felt like enough. She needed therapy, professional help, someone to guide her through the mess she'd been thrown into. But Samantha flat out refused every suggestion I made. "Therapy is a waste of money," she said. "Bella's fine. She just needs to get over herself." It wasn't long before Bella started confiding in me more than ever. She'd call me late at night, her voice small and trembling as she whispered about the fights at home. "Mom doesn't listen," she'd say. "She just gets mad." I tried to reassure her, to make her feel seen, but I knew it wasn't enough. She needed more than words, she needed action. The tipping point came when Bella was 16. Samantha and I had another blowout over Bella's well-being. I suggested therapy again, and this time Samantha accused me of trying to steal her daughter. "You've always wanted to take her from me," she spat, her words dripping with venom. "You think you can do better? You think you're her mother now?" I didn't argue back. There was no point. Samantha wasn't going to see reason, and every fight just pushed her further into denial. But that night, Bella ran away. She showed up at my doorstep, her eyes swollen from crying. "I can't stay there anymore," she said. Her voice was quiet, tired. "It's too much." I let her in without hesitation. She stayed with me for a few days, and during that time I saw a glimpse of the Bella I used to know. She laughed, an actual genuine laugh, when we watched a silly movie together. She even opened up a little about school, talking about her favorite teacher and the one class she still enjoyed. It was like watching a flower bloom after a storm, fragile but beautiful. But those days of peace didn't last long. Samantha found out Bella was with me and unleashed a storm of accusations. She called me a manipulator, a liar, and a thief. She claimed I was turning Bella against her, that I was the reason their relationship was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to protect Bella, to give her the stability and support she so clearly needed, but I also didn't want to destroy what little remained of Samantha's relationship with her daughter. It felt like I was caught in an impossible situation, torn between doing what was right and preserving the fragile balance of our family. That's when I made the hardest decision of my life. I called a lawyer to explore the possibility of guardianship. It wasn't a step I took lightly. I knew it would ignite a firestorm of conflict within the family. But I couldn't stand by any longer, not when Bella's future was at stake. The moment I decided to pursue guardianship, I knew there was no turning back. It wasn't just about Bella anymore. It was about doing what was right, even if it meant tearing open wounds in my family that might never fully heal. The first person I told was Bella. I sat her down one evening, her favorite blanket draped over her shoulders as she curled up on my couch. "I'm going to fight for you," I said. "It's not going to be easy, but I need you to know I'm here no matter what." Her eyes welled up with tears. "Do you think it'll work?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer for her then, so I just held her hand and promised to try. When Samantha found out, all hell broke loose. She showed up at my house the very next day, pounding on the door until I opened it. The second she saw me, she launched into a tirade. "You're destroying my life!" she screamed, her voice cracking with fury. "You think you can just take my daughter? You have no right!" I stood there letting her vent, her words a hurricane of anger and pain. When she finally stopped to catch her breath, I said calmly, "This isn't about taking Bella from you, it's about giving her what she needs." But Samantha wasn't hearing any of it. To her, this was a betrayal, a calculated attack on her role as Bella's mother. She stormed off, vowing to fight me every step of the way. The backlash from the family was immediate. Some relatives, like my cousin Tyler and my Aunt Joan, quietly reached out to express their support. "You're doing the right thing," Joan told me one evening. "Bella deserves a chance to thrive, and she's clearly not getting that at home." But others, like my Uncle Dan, were less understanding. "Samantha's her mother," he said firmly during a family dinner. "You don't just take someone's kid, no matter how bad things are. Families stick together. You should be helping her, not going against her." It was exhausting trying to navigate the family drama while preparing for the legal battle ahead. The lawyer I hired, Miss Hargrove, was patient but blunt. "This won't be easy," she warned. "You'll need evidence, documented proof of Samantha's instability and Bella's struggles. Courts don't take guardianship cases lightly, especially when it involves taking a child from their biological parent." So I started gathering everything I could. School records that showed Bella's declining grades before she started staying with me, notes from her teachers about how withdrawn she had been, messages from Samantha refusing therapy and dismissing Bella's pain. I even got statements from a few relatives willing to speak up about Samantha's inconsistent parenting. Meanwhile, Bella's life began to shift. Away from her mother's chaotic home, she started to blossom. Her grades improved almost overnight, and she began smiling again. Her teachers even called to say they'd noticed the change. "She seems more engaged, more focused," one of them said. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." But Samantha's anger only grew. She took to social media, posting long emotional rants about how I was tearing her family apart. "My own sister is stealing my child," one post read. "She's brainwashing Bella and turning everyone against me." The comments were a mix of support and skepticism. Some people rallied behind her, offering sympathy and validation. Others, people who knew our family's history, messaged me privately to say they understood why I was doing what I was doing. Despite the noise, I tried to keep Bella shielded from it all. I encouraged her to focus on the things that made her happy: art, music, and the few friends she'd managed to hold on to. I even set up counseling sessions for her, hoping they'd help her process everything. Slowly, she started to open up, sharing bits and pieces of her pain. One night, as we sat in the living room, Bella turned to me and said, "I feel safe here. I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time." Her words hit me like a wave. It was the clearest sign yet that I was doing the right thing, no matter how messy it got. The first court hearing was scheduled a few weeks later. Samantha and I were both required to appear, and the atmosphere was as tense as I'd expected. Samantha, dressed in a sharp blazer, painted herself as a misunderstood mother just trying to do her best. She argued that I had overstepped, that Bella's behavior was perfectly normal for a teenager, and that I was the one creating problems. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on the facts. I presented the evidence of Bella's progress since living with me, her improved grades, her therapist's notes about her emotional stability, and even letters from her teachers praising her newfound focus. The judge listened carefully, her expression unreadable. After hours of testimony, she ordered a psychological evaluation for both Samantha and me, a step I hadn't anticipated but welcomed. As the hearing adjourned, Samantha turned to me in the hallway, her eyes blazing with anger. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. What was there to say? For Bella's sake, I knew I had to keep going, no matter how much it hurt. The psychological evaluations were the longest 2 weeks of my life. Bella tried to act as if everything was normal, but I could tell the weight of it all was pressing down on her. Every now and then I'd catch her staring off into space, her brow furrowed, as though she was bracing for some unseen impact. Samantha didn't make it any easier. She kept bombarding Bella with messages, swinging wildly between guilt-tripping and outright accusations. One day, it was, "How could you betray me like this?" The next, "Your aunt is manipulating you. Don't let her ruin our family." It was too much for Bella. One night I found her curled up in her room, her phone off, tears streaming silently down her face. "I can't take it anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why can't she just leave me alone?" I tried to comfort her the best I could, telling her it wasn't her fault and that she had every right to feel what she was feeling. But deep down, I felt the same helpless frustration. Samantha's refusal to accept reality was like a storm we couldn't escape, no matter how hard we tried. The evaluations came back. My lawyer, Miss Hargrove, went over the results with me in her office. Samantha's report painted a clear picture of someone struggling with deep-seated denial and emotional instability. Mine, by contrast, highlighted my ability to provide a stable and supportive environment for Bella. "It's a strong case," Miss Hargrove said. "The judge will take this into serious consideration." The final court hearing was set for the following week. The days leading up to it were a blur of preparation and quiet anxiety. Bella and I talked late into the night, going over what she might have to say in court. "Just tell the truth," I told her. "No one can take that away from you." When the day arrived, the courtroom felt suffocating. Samantha was there with her lawyer, her posture rigid and her face set in a defiant scowl. Bella sat beside me, looking small but determined. The judge opened the proceedings by addressing both of us. "This case is about what's best for Bella," she said firmly. "Not about past grievances or personal feelings. Let's keep that in mind as we move forward." Bella was the first to testify. She stood at the front of the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edges of the podium. "I love my mom," she began, her voice shaky but steady. "But I can't live with her. It's too hard. It's always been too hard." She went on to describe the chaos at home, the fights, the instability, the feeling of being ignored or dismissed. "When I'm with Alyssa," she said, glancing at me, "I feel safe. I can breathe." Her words broke my heart and strengthened my resolve all at once. When Samantha took the stand, she painted a very different picture. She described herself as a hard-working single mother who had been unfairly judged and sabotaged by her own sister. "Alyssa has always wanted to take Bella from me," she said, her voice rising with emotion. "She's made me out to be a bad mother when all I've ever tried to do is my best." The judge listened carefully, her expression neutral but focused. Finally, it was my turn. I spoke about Bella's progress since living with me, the improved grades, the newfound confidence, the stability she hadn't had before. I presented letters from her teachers and therapists, as well as the results of the psychological evaluations. "This isn't about taking Bella away from Samantha," I said, my voice steady. "It's about giving her a chance to thrive, to feel supported and safe. That's all I've ever wanted." The judge adjourned the hearing, stating that she would need time to review all the evidence before making her decision. As we left the courtroom, Samantha caught up to me in the hallway. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild with anger. "You're ruining my life," she spat, her voice low but venomous. "You think you've won? You haven't. This isn't over." I didn't respond. I just took Bella's hand and walked away. The waiting period was agonizing. Bella tried to keep herself busy with schoolwork and art, but every so often I'd catch her checking her phone, her expression tense. Samantha's messages had slowed, but the weight of her presence lingered. Finally, the judge's ruling came in. Miss Hargrove called me with the news. "The court has granted you permanent guardianship," she said. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Bella and I hugged in the middle of the living room, both of us crying tears of relief. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't seem so uncertain. The judge's ruling brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years, but it also marked the beginning of a different kind of journey. Bella was officially under my guardianship, but the scars of the past didn't vanish overnight. She carried the weight of everything that had happened, her mother's instability, the family division, and the guilt she couldn't quite shake. At first, Bella thrived in the stability of her new life. She dove into her schoolwork with renewed focus, her grades climbing higher than I'd ever seen before. Her teachers called to tell me how much she'd improved. "She's like a different person," one of them said. "Confident, engaged, it's amazing to see." But there were still moments of sadness, moments when Bella would retreat into herself. Samantha's presence lingered like a shadow. She continued to send messages, less frequent now but still heavy with guilt and blame. "You've abandoned me," one read. "You've let Alyssa turn you against me." I knew Bella read them, even though she rarely responded. One night I found her sitting by the window, staring out into the dark. "Do you think she'll ever change?" she asked quietly. "I hope so," I said honestly. "But even if she doesn't, it's not your responsibility to fix her." Bella nodded but didn't say anything more. I knew it would take time for her to truly believe that. To help her heal, I made sure she had a strong support system. I reached out to family members and friends who had stood by us, inviting them over for dinners or outings. Seeing Bella surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her made a world of difference. She started to open up more, laughing at jokes and sharing stories about her day. She also began to explore her interests again. Bella had always loved art, but her passion had dimmed over the years. Now, with the chaos behind her, she picked up a sketchpad again. Watching her sit at the kitchen table, pencil in hand and a faint smile on her face, felt like a small miracle. Samantha, surprisingly, began to show signs of change as well. After months of avoiding therapy, she finally started attending sessions. Family members told me she seemed calmer, less defensive. She even reached out one day asking if she could meet Bella in a neutral setting. I was cautious but agreed. Bella, too, was hesitant. "What if she just tries to guilt me again?" she asked. "If she does, you don't have to stay," I told her. "This is about what you're comfortable with." The meeting was emotional but restrained. Samantha apologized, her voice trembling as she admitted her mistakes. "I didn't know how to be a good mom," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I still don't, but I want to try." Bella listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She didn't say much, but afterward she shared her feelings with her therapist. "I think I believe her," she said, "but I'm not ready to trust her yet." It was progress, even if it was slow. As the months went by, Bella began to find her footing. She made new friends at school, joined a couple of clubs, and even started talking about college. "I want to study art," she said one evening, her face lighting up with excitement. "I've been looking at schools, and there's this one with a great program." I couldn't have been prouder. Seeing her dream about the future after everything she'd been through was like watching a flower bloom in the sun. Samantha's efforts to rebuild her relationship with Bella continued, but they were careful and measured. She respected the boundaries Bella had set, and for the first time, their interactions didn't feel like battles. Bella still lived with me, and Samantha seemed to accept that, for now, at least. When Bella's graduation day arrived, I threw a celebration for her. It wasn't just about her academic achievements, it was about everything she'd overcome to get to this point. Family and friends gathered at my house, filling it with laughter and warmth. Samantha came too, keeping to the sidelines but watching Bella with quiet pride. It was the first time in years that the family felt even remotely united, a small but meaningful step toward healing. As Bella blew out the candles on her cake, I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. That night, as we cleaned up after the party, Bella turned to me and said, "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I just did what anyone would do." But Bella shook her head. "Not everyone would have fought like you did." Hearing those words made every fight, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt worth it. Bella was safe, supported, and finally looking ahead to a future filled with possibilities. The journey wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges to face, but for the first time in a long time, our lives were steady. We had peace, and we weren't going to let it go. Story 2. I am a 29-year-old lady who has believed that her family was stable for the majority of her life. Emma, my older sister, is 32 years old. She was the golden kid growing up. No one stated it out, but everyone knew it. It was hard to overlook my parents' partiality, even though they never intended any damage. Everything improved for Emma, including increased praise, attention, and even financial assistance when she needed it. Back then, I didn't mind much. I didn't let that affect me too much since I assumed it was just the way family relationships operated. I established my own tech firm in my mid-20s, taking a major risk. It wasn't simple. I gave it everything I had, worked weekends, missed out on social gatherings, and for the first several years, barely made ends meet. However, things ultimately improved, and my efforts were rewarded. My business was doing well by the time I was 28, and I had at last achieved financial stability. I felt comfortable even though I wasn't earning millions of dollars or anything, but I never showed it off. I was simply relieved to have some security at last. In contrast, Emma was not doing so well. She had attempted to launch a boutique, but it failed very rapidly. To be honest, she had always been a little rash in her choices, but she blamed it on poor timing and market conditions. She was in severe financial problems by the time her firm failed. She told me she was in dire need of assistance and was about to file for bankruptcy. She requested a loan of $50,000 and committed to repaying it in 2 years. I made no hesitation at all. When she said that all she needed was a lifeline to get back on her feet, I believed her because she was my sister. I hoped she would honor her promise, so I moved the funds to her account that same week. 2 years passed. Emma not only failed to pay back the money, but she also stayed silent about it. She would dismiss me whenever I brought it up with evasive assurances that she would find a solution quickly. She quickly started making excuses in her comments. She began to say things like, "You're doing well, and families shouldn't charge each other for money. You're worried about it, but why? It hurt." The way my parents responded when I informed them about it, however, was even more heartbreaking. Rather of sympathizing with my unhappiness, they advised me to move on. They said that Emma was having financial difficulties and that it wasn't fair to put pressure on her because I was in a better financial situation. What I was hearing was unbelievable. The broken promise and how readily everyone disregarded it as if it didn't matter were more important than the money. I became more aware of the rifts in our family's dynamic. Emma had been the object of my parents' covert favoritism. Our connection deteriorated. In an attempt to concentrate on my career and personal life, I somewhat withdrew, but the strain persisted. Then everything clicked one day. Emma's postings on social media caught my attention. She wasn't having any trouble. She had been using my money to support a way of life I could never have imagined. She was photographed posing with a new automobile, wearing fancy clothes, and taking luxurious holidays. It seemed as though someone had hit me in the stomach. She simply laughed it off when I challenged her, expecting at least an explanation or an apology. "It's only money," she continued, "and I was overreacting. You are capable of producing more." I became aware that Emma didn't consider me to be her sister at that point. When I brought it up to my parents in the hopes that they would finally see my point of view, they doubled down because she saw me as her safety net. They accused me of being self-centered and greedy for destroying the family dynamic over something so trivial. I was finished. I made the decision that I could no longer allow myself to be exploited and disregarded. I became even more reclusive, avoiding phone calls, missing family dinners, and concentrating only on my work. Emma wasn't finished, even though I thought that would be the end of it. Conveniently, my parents did not mention Emma's presence when they invited me to a family get-together. I went in the hopes of avoiding any drama, even though I should have known better. That wasn't going to happen in front of everyone, of course. Emma twisted the facts to make it seem like I was a miser who wouldn't help out family members in need when she brought up my finances. She made crude remarks about how I was too good to be a member of the family now and revealed personal information about my earnings. The decisive moment came that evening. I understood that no matter how hard I tried to defend my position, my family would not support me. No matter how poisonous Emma's actions were, they were too preoccupied with keeping her safe. I immediately made the decision that I had to begin defending myself, even if it meant doing things that would permanently alter the dynamics of our family. I had no idea at the time just how far Emma would go, or how much worse things would get. After the family get-together, the situation didn't calm down as I had hoped. Emma, if anything, intensified the situation. She had been sharing her version of events, and I began to hear this from mutual friends and even extended family. She claimed that I was some avaricious villain who was squandering my fortune and abandoning her in the process. She completely flipped the narrative by telling people that I had turned her down when she was having financial difficulties. It was harmful in addition to being annoying. Some people actually believed her, and it started to affect how they treated me. That's when I decided I needed to handle this seriously. I wasn't sure what my options were legally, but I figured it was time to find out. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer to see if I could sue her for the $50,000 she owed me. The lawyer was polite but blunt, without solid documentation, like a signed contract or an official loan agreement. It would be an uphill battle. I had some texts and emails, but nothing that explicitly outlines the loan terms. The lawyer said I could pursue it, but it might get messy and there was no guarantee of a win. I left the meeting frustrated but determined if I couldn't take legal action yet, I needed to be smarter about this. That's when I decided to comb through Emma's public social media posts. I already knew she was flaunting her lifestyle online, but I hadn't paid close attention to the timeline. As I scrolled back, it became glaringly obvious. Right after I had transferred her the loan, she had started posting about luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and high-end shopping sprees. There was even a photo of her posing next to her new ride, a car that had clearly cost more than I wanted to think about. Armed with this new information, I decided to try one last time to resolve things civilly. I invited her to meet up, hoping that showing her the evidence might lead to a productive conversation. Instead, it turned into a complete disaster. Emma brushed off my concerns, claiming I was just jealous of her lifestyle. She laughed in my face and told me I needed to get over it. That was the final straw. I went straight to my parents to explain what had happened and why. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I told them I was cutting Emma off completely. I wouldn't attend any family events if she was there, and I didn't want to hear about her financial troubles anymore. My parents begged me to reconsider. They even offered to repay part of the loan themselves if it meant keeping the family together. But at that point, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle of it all. I told them no and walked away feeling stuck and needing advice. I decided to share my story anonymously online. I posted a detailed account of everything that had happened, leaving out identifying details, and asked for advice. The response was overwhelming. My post went viral almost overnight. People from all over shared their support, telling me I wasn't in the wrong and calling Emma's behavior entitled and manipulative. It was validating to know I wasn't alone, but the story didn't end there. Emma found out about the post. I'm not sure if someone sent it to her or if she stumbled across it herself, but she decided to respond publicly in trying to defend herself. She inadvertently confirmed several key details, making herself look even worse. People in the comments started calling her out, and her attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly. Things escalated quickly after that. A few mutual friends who had initially sided with Emma reached out to me, apologizing and saying they hadn't realized how bad things were. Some of them even shared stories of their own about Emma's manipulative behavior, and it was eye-opening. Emma wasn't just difficult with me. This was a pattern as I started to regain some control over the situation. Emma decided to take things to another level. She began contacting people in my professional network, including business partners, and trying to damage my reputation. Thankfully, most of them saw through her lies, but the fact that she even tried was a new low. Realizing I needed more protection, I decided to hire a private investigator to dig into Emma's financial habits. I assumed if she had been foolish enough to flaunt her expenditures openly, there could be more she wasn't displaying. Meanwhile, I realized she had also been bad-mouthing me to my partner, seeking to create extra friction in my personal life. It worked for a time. My boyfriend and I had some unpleasant talks, but after the truth came out, we were stronger than ever. By this point, the online article about Emma had gotten even more popularity, with hundreds of comments and individuals sharing their own tales of dealing with toxic family members. The support was amazing, and it helped me keep focused on what needed to be done. I started prepared for the aftermath, knowing Emma wouldn't go down gently. The ultimate blow came when I decided to make an update online on everything Emma had done since my original post. It got much more popular than the previous one, and the attention on her behavior escalated. I intimated that I was contemplating a huge move to defend myself, but I didn't tell what it was just yet. I wanted to make sure everything was in order before taking the next step. This was far from finished. Update to Emma's smear campaign against me wasn't simply restricted to common friends and relatives anymore. It turns out she had been trying to spread rumors about my firm to potential clients, stating I wasn't trustworthy. I discovered out when a long-standing client called out, confused about certain things they'd heard about me. I understood then that she wasn't only making personal attacks on me, she was attempting to ruin my business. I started recording everything right once, including emails, screenshots, and even cryptic text messages from those who had heard the stories. Everything ended up in a file. It was a wise decision on my part to have my private investigator investigate Emma's actions further. While managing her bankrupt firm, he discovered something significant. Emma had probably cheated on her taxes. Her publicly accessible financial records included inconsistencies that suggested she had reported fraudulent information. For me, this opened up a new path. I spoke with my lawyer once more, this time regarding reporting Emma's possible tax fraud to the authorities rather than the loan. The attorney affirmed that it was worthwhile to pursue if the facts held up. But I didn't jump right in. Before I took any action, I wanted to be sure my case was solid. My parents, meantime, weren't making matters any simpler. When they learned that I was looking into Emma's financial history, they pleaded with me to stop. For the benefit of the family, they said. I had to be the mature one and let things go. They obviously didn't understand the gravity of Emma's actions, or perhaps they just didn't want to. The guilt tripping began when I said no. If I didn't make amends with Emma, they even threatened to remove me from their will. I wasn't as bothered by that as they presumably wanted. By now, our relationship was all but doomed due to their partiality for Emma. Emma made a mistake during one of her furious text outbursts amid all of this. She acknowledged that she had paid for personal costs with the $50,000 loan. I'm fortunate to have helped her live her best life, she said. I was shocked by her lack of self-control, but I wasn't going to let it get to me. I add the text to the mounting body of evidence against her and preserve it as proof. When Emma attempted to sour relations between my spouse and me, things took a different turn. She spoke with my partner directly, spreading false information about myself and my company. It was effective for a time. We had a short split when my partner began to doubt things. After a period of darkness, the truth was revealed. We made amends once Emma's falsehoods came to light. In order to assist me deal with the aftermath, my boyfriend even turned into one of my best supporters. Emma continued to attempt to get support from anybody who would listen, as if that wasn't enough. Her attempts, however, failed this time. As more of her falsehoods were exposed, her already suspicious social circle started to turn against her. Even more damning material was disclosed to me by a former acquaintance of hers. Emma had a history of defrauding people out of their money. In one instance, she had sold gullible consumers fake expensive products. This individual posted texts and receipts as evidence, which further strengthened the web case against her. My posts regarding the problem were still getting more and more views. The majority of readers were encouraging, sharing similar experiences and giving advice. I was even persuaded by some to go ahead and officially report Emma's deception. The more I considered it, the more I understood that I needed to defend myself against Emma, as well as the harm she might still cause with everything I had accumulated. My legal complaint regarding Emma's tax fraud was eventually submitted. I saw no other option, even though I knew this would make matters worse. Emma needed to face the repercussions, since she had gone too far. The consequences were nearly instantaneous. More individuals started to distance themselves from Emma when word of the complaint circulated within her social group. Her skill to play the victim had once helped to build her reputation, but now it was failing. More evidence was uncovered by the private investigator I hired, including evidence that Emma had been embezzling money from her parents for years under the pretense of loans she never meant to pay back. My parents still appear committed to standing up for Emma in spite of everything. Even if their personal finances were impacted, they didn't think she could be capable of such things. That quote when I knew I couldn't count on them to help me. Their partiality prevented them from seeing Emma for who she really was. I made the decision to take action to safeguard my finances and legal rights. To make sure my assets were safe and untouchable, I sought advice from a financial counselor. My family was also informed that I was done being kind. If they chose to, they could take Emma's side. However, I would no longer participate in the mayhem. I couldn't help but feel more clear-headed as I started to separate from my family. I saw them for what they truly were for the first time. Individuals who put appearances and Emma's devotion above of justice and responsibility. Although it hurt, it made me more determined. I made a significant clue about what I was going to do to Emma in my next online post. The reaction was tremendous. I received thousands of comments encouraging me to follow through. They were unaware that I had already started the process. I was prepared to ensure that Emma wouldn't get away with what she had done. Update 3. After speaking with my attorney, I made the decision to formally escalate the situation. Emma owes me $50,000, so I filed a small claims case against her. I realized it was time to hold her responsible, even if it wasn't an easy choice. I put everything I owned together. Social media posts, bank transactions, emails, and texts all provided evidence of when I transferred her the money. Although it wasn't a clear-cut case, my attorney reassured me that there was enough evidence to support a compelling case. When will the lawsuit be served to me? Her response was precisely what I had anticipated. On social media, she posted ambiguous statements about how families should never sue one another, publicly dismissing it as a fear tactic. In private, however, it was obvious that she was in a panic. She attempted to get in touch with me via common acquaintances and even messaged me to see if we could arrange something. Since there was nothing left to bargain about, I chose to disregard it. She had squandered every chance she had to settle things amicably. Naturally, my folks were incensed. They felt I was going too far and accused me of ruining the family. They threatened to cut off all communication if I didn't withdraw the case after I reminded them that Emma's falsehoods and their unflinching backing of her were the root of the whole mess. That was painful, but it didn't alter my choice. This situation was the result of their bias, and I wasn't going to back down. People around us appeared to change as a result of the case. Emma's mutual acquaintances, who had first backed her, began to see the overwhelming evidence against her. As it became difficult to ignore screenshots of her ostentatious expenditures, her public posts, and even her previous conduct, several friends who had been undecided sought out to express regret and offer support. Seeing individuals finally acknowledge the truth was reassuring. In the meantime, my internet writings were getting more and more views. My topic got picked up by a well-known Reddit story recapping YouTube channel, and all of a sudden, the matter was getting even more attention. Many others had similar experiences with toxic family members, and the reactions were largely positive. Emma's conduct came under further scrutiny as a result of the exposé. The information on Emma's possible tax fraud was sent to her employer by someone, most likely a viewer or reader of the blogs. That wasn't what I had anticipated, but I wasn't shocked either. Emma quickly learned about the probe and started blaming me for it. Although she had ruined her own life, she blamed me of attempting to do so. In the meanwhile, I made another startling discovery. Emma wasn't only a manipulator. For years, she had also been embezzling money from her parents. She persuaded them to lend her money. She was not going to pay it back. I pieced everything together by listening in on a chat between my parents and reviewing some previous mails. She had utilized the thousands of dollars they had provided her to maintain the same opulent lifestyle that she had financed with my money. Even though their finances were running low, they refused to admit that she had abused them. Emma attempted to postpone the proceedings as the court date drew near, arguing that she required additional time to be ready. The court rejected her motion because he didn't believe it. Emma seemed to lose her mind over this. She started attacking me on social media, claiming that I had destroyed her life and making herself out to be the victim. The criticism was quick, and the post only served to highlight her actions. Even many who had previously backed her started criticizing her. My bond with my partner strengthened throughout this time. They posted a succinct and straightforward statement explaining what had transpired and the reasons behind my complaint, openly defending me online. Some of Emma's erstwhile pals began to see through her deceptive techniques as a result of their support. Then there was another insight. Emma's old acquaintance contacted me with even more incriminating proof of her past. Emma allegedly operated a fraud in which she sold phony expensive handbags, tricked customers into thinking they were authentic, and kept the money for herself. Along with documentation of the transactions, this individual submitted screenshots of their interactions with Emma. It was just one more strand in Emma's web of deception. My parents' steadfast support for Emma started to falter as the court case approached. Their financial condition had deteriorated, and Emma's refusal to assist them was obvious. At last, they reluctantly came up to me and admitted that something wasn't right. I declined their request for my assistance. Now that they had made their decision, they had to deal with the fallout. By this point, Emma's world was falling apart more quickly than I had predicted. She was losing the support and confidence of almost everyone in her immediate vicinity. She had used charm and manipulation to achieve her goals for years, but the reality was now catching up with her. In my subsequent online update, I made a suggestion that this was about more than simply money. It has to do with security, reputation, and trust. Emma was paying the price since she had bet everything. When the day finally came, the courtroom was filled with updates. Although I was anxious when I first arrived, I felt confident in the information I had acquired. Emma, however, seemed certain, as though she believed she could persuade the court to rule in her favor. By portraying me as a spiteful sibling who didn't comprehend familial devotion, she played the victim. Her performance did not, however, influence the judge. I brought everything when it was my time. The social media posts, emails, and messages that detailed Emma's lavish spending and the loan's timing were quite obvious. My attorney carefully went over the material, highlighting all of the contradictions in C and Emma's statements. When we were finished, it was clear that Emma had no good defense. Emma was ordered to pay back the $50,000 with interest when the judge decided in my favor. Emma's response was furious. Declaring that this was far from done, she raced out of the courtroom. However, it seemed like a minor but important win for me. Although the decision was based on principle, I didn't anticipate receiving the money anytime soon. My report regarding Emma's tax wrongdoing eventually resulted in an official inquiry shortly after the hearing. Significant disparities were found in her accounts after an audit. Emma was essentially cut off from her money, and her once opulent lifestyle came to a halt when she was charged with tax evasion and had her bank accounts blocked while the inquiry was underway, as the private investigator had feared. As expected, my parents pleaded with me to step in. They begged me to spare Emma from going to jail, saying that despite everything she had done, she was still family. I declined. I informed them that Emma would have to deal with the fallout from her behavior. This was no longer about sibling rivalry. It has to do with responsibility. Emma's situation simply worsened. After learning of the inquiry, her company began an internal assessment of her behavior at work. The outcome was unavoidable. Emma fell further into financial disaster after being sacked without a reliable source of income and having her account seized. Creditors began to knock on her door as her bills accumulated. My parents' staunch support for Emma started to wane as the situation became more apparent. They were unable to deny that Emma's behavior had exacerbated their own financial difficulties. Emma had taken out loans that had drained their cash. At last, they began to place the blame on her. As my parents became increasingly irritated with Emma and her constant justifications, the gap in the family deepened. My network of supporters gathered behind me in the interim. I was urged to enjoy the courtroom triumph and concentrate on the future by my girlfriend, who had supported me during the entire process. I was encouraged by close friends who had witnessed Emma's genuine nature and reminded me that I had made the correct decision. But Emma wasn't done yet. Once more, she vented on social media about how I had destroyed her life and accused me of being spiteful. However, her posts just made things worse for her. Her friends and family began to put together the reality, and some even openly criticized her. She appeared to further distance herself from friends and acquaintances with each tirade she wrote, revealing yet another aspect of her deceit. My lawsuit and the tax fraud allegations weren't the end of the legal issues. She was also sued by a number of creditors and former customers she had defrauded. It was similar to witnessing a house of cards fall apart. Emma's deceptive and manipulative empire of falsehoods was collapsing more quickly than she could keep up with it. In the midst of all this confusion, my parents came up to me and apologized grudgingly. They acknowledged for the first time that they had been oblivious to misconduct. They admitted the harm their favoritism had caused and expressed sorry for the way they had handled the matter. Even though I was grateful for the gesture, I made it obvious that things couldn't return to their previous state. I made it clear that I wouldn't put up with any more attempts to manipulate me into cleaning up Emma's mess or to place blame on me. Emma made one more attempt to control me because she was desperate and had run out of choices. She claimed in a lengthy statement that she had changed and that she needed assistance to get back on her feet. She said that if I would only give her another opportunity, she would make everything right. It didn't fool me. I didn't answer at all. I had no intention of repairing all the bridges she had destroyed. Emma turned into a cautionary tale as her social circle dwindled and her legal issues grew. As they realized who she really was, many who had previously adored her started to turn away. The youngster that was born with no wrongdoing was now shunned. She was only a shadow of the person she posed as. In retrospect, I see that I learned a valuable lesson from the entire experience. Emma was betrayed for more reasons than money. It has to do with self-respect and trust. I discovered how to put my own health first and establish limits, even with family. I made a reference to a last act of closure in my last online update. I wasn't going to let Emma take any more because she had already taken so much for me. I felt like I had control for the first time in years. I had acquired something far more precious than Emma, who may have lost everything. Calm. Update 5. When Emma unexpectedly showed up at my workplace, it was the final nail in the coffin. It was hectic and unexpected. She made a big commotion in the foyer, demanding that I make amends, and accused me of wrecking her life. She had to be escorted out by security, but not before I took pictures of the whole thing. The last push was that I had to do something. Given the increasing intensity of her actions, I requested a restraining order against her, which the court promptly granted. Emma was essentially unable from contacting me directly because of the restraining order. I was able to concentrate on my life for the first time in years without having to worry about her meddling all the time. My personal life seemed lighter as I focused all of my attention on expanding my business, which blossomed. I began to re-establish relationships with acquaintances I had ignored amid the stress, and my partner and I grew closer. Emma's life, meanwhile, was utterly collapsing. Her bankrupt business's fraud claims resulted in a formal trial, supported by audit evidence and statements from previous customers. She obviously had no strong defense. She received a sentence of many years in jail after being found guilty on various charges of fraud. After posting pictures of her glitzy life on social media, she stopped posting. She seemed to have vanished overnight. Emma's conduct had repercussions that extended to my parents. To settle debts Emma had accrued in their names, they had to sell their home. Despite their reluctance to acknowledge it, they began to realize the full depth of Emma's devastation once they moved into a smaller house. They came up to me once again and apologized for not believing the first one and for allowing Emma's actions to continue for so long. Although I accepted their apologies, I made it plain that the previous state of affairs could not be restored. I set clear limits and informed them that going ahead, I would not put up with any partiality or manipulation. Our friendship started to mend over time, but it would never completely repair since they appeared to understand. My Reddit topic kept gaining momentum as the dust settled, with hundreds of comments from individuals complimenting my tenacity and sharing their own experiences of coping with toxic family members. It became one of the most upvoted articles in the subreddit's history. Some even said that my experience motivated them to take charge of their own circumstances. Seeing how widespread my story's influence has grown was incredible. I learned through rumors that Emma was living with a friend, earning minimum money, and no longer in contact with almost everyone she used to know. Once displaying her money and controlling everyone around her, the woman was now beginning a new life at a very low point. At that moment, it was difficult to feel anything for her. She was now dealing with the fallout from the decisions she had taken. This experience constituted a turning point in my life. After giving things some thought, I saw how much I had changed. Although Emma's betrayal had been upsetting, it had also taught me to advocate for myself and put my own health ahead of unhealthy familial relationships. I vowed to myself that I would never again allow someone to exploit me. For their part, my parents started to make modest but meaningful attempts to win back my trust. They began to prioritize fairness in their contacts with me and shown sincere regret for their previous behavior. Even while I valued their efforts, I was aware that there would always be some wounds in our connection. Nevertheless, it was a step forward, and I was prepared to compromise. Personally, I achieved a new relationship milestone with my spouse. I found strength in their steadfast support during this hardship, and I came to the realization that I couldn't fathom my life without them. They accepted my proposal. It felt like a sign that brighter times were coming and was a glimmer in a long, gloomy chapter. I made the decision not to go to Emma's sentencing hearing. Nothing remained to benefit from being there. I had moved on, and she was already dealing with the fallout from her behavior. I didn't find closure in seeing her get punished. It was about taking back my life and creating a better future for myself. Emma received a jail term of many years. It was the last straw that undermined her power over our family. Our family dynamics were far less tense once she left the picture. After being freed from Emma's control, my parents started working on mending their connection with me. I was writing my last Reddit update. I expressed my gratitude to everyone who had followed my tale and provided guidance and encouragement. In addition to being an emotional roller coaster, the encounter had been life-changing. I talked about how I was concentrating on my future, expanding my company, taking care of my relationships, and ultimately finding serenity. Emma ultimately believed she could deceive me and get away with it. She ultimately paid the ultimate price, but she cost me my family. She lost everything when I regained my authority. Story 3. Hello, I'm 24 years old, and I live with my 22-year-old younger sister, Amanda. We moved into their home a few years ago after our parents went away, and we have been sharing expenditures ever since. Managing our relationship while juggling the daily routines of life has been difficult, but we've managed to make it work somehow, or so I believed. I have 2 jobs. In the mornings, one works as a barista, while in the evenings, another serves customers at a restaurant. Maintaining a strict budget is necessary to achieve my goal of saving money for a professional certification that would help me grow in my work. While Amanda works part-time, she spends as if she had a trust fund. Expensive cosmetics, stylish clothing, and designer luggage. It seems like she has something new all the time, even if it means taking on a bigger portion of the food for the home because she neglected to contribute. I've learnt to refrain from passing judgment. My clothes are personal to me. Fast fashion doesn't appeal to me. Every article of clothes I possess was picked out with care. While some are meaningful presents, others were purchased at a discount after weeks of saving. For instance, my work uniforms are necessary for my profession and are more than simply clothes. I'm happy to have a few rare vintage pieces in my collection, which I've even invested in. There has always been some conflict between Amanda and me over boundaries. She frequently takes items from me without asking. Books, shoes, and makeup. I've overlooked it more times than I can remember, even though it's bothersome. But she's been getting worse lately. After a demanding double shift, I've returned home to see my favorite clothing rumpled in a heap on the floor or a pair of boots completely gone, only to discover them on her Instagram later that evening. I sensed something wasn't right as soon as I came through the door. My closet doors were ajar, my room was immaculate, and as I approached, I had a sinking sensation. I had lost half of my clothing. The dress I intend to wear to a friend's wedding in 2 weeks, my vintage jewelry, and my job clothes. Lost. When I confronted Amanda, she was seated in the living room, grinning broadly while looking through her phone. She informed me that she had finally done something nice by giving my things to a local charity, and she appeared totally unconcerned. She claimed to have seen that I wasn't wearing half of them, and reasoned that they would be more useful to others in need. I couldn't believe she hadn't asked. I hadn't even considered making sure I needed those things. She shrugged and stated the clothing were simply laying there when I told her they weren't hers to give away. She wouldn't tell me where she had taken them when I asked. I locked myself in my room to get my thoughts straight before I began the calculation. A few of the items she donated were pricey. The expense of replacing my work outfits alone would be in the hundreds. And let's not even talk about the old stuff. It was easily worth more than $2,000. However, money wasn't the only factor. I had put a lot of effort into creating a wardrobe that suited my needs and style. It was like losing a piece of myself when I lost it. Amanda dismissed my worries when I addressed her once more. I should be glad that she had done something philanthropic, she added, calling me materialistic. It enraged me. She disregarded it as entirely different when I pointed out that she had just purchased a new dress earlier that day, one of those expensive, stylish outfits she adores. I didn't get any sleep that night. Instead, In an attempt to locate my clothes, I began phoning every local donation organization I could locate. While some locations were beneficial, others had already given out the things, and there was no way to retrieve them. Every phone call eroded my optimism. I was angry and emotionally spent by morning. Amanda seemed unconcerned. She even flaunted her new goods on Instagram as she carried on with her day as if nothing had occurred. I was astounded by the boldness. She hadn't even made an effort to make amends or offer an apology. If anything, she exuded self-confidence, behaving as though she was a hero for clearing out the mess. It dawned on me then. Amanda had to suffer the repercussions herself before she could learn anything from this. She had to know what it was like to lose something you've worked so hard to get, and something you cared about. I wasn't sure how, but I made the decision right then and there to stop allowing her to treat me like this. A closed storage box in the corner caught my attention as I sat in my room looking at my somewhat empty closet. It had been storing things I didn't use frequently, but couldn't bring myself to part with for years. I had a flash of inspiration at that very time, a plan to reverse the situation and show Amanda how seriously she had gone wrong. In hindsight, this marked the start of a sea change in my relationship with Amanda. I was unaware at the time, but what began as betrayal and frustration would quickly kick off a series of events I could never have foreseen. Additionally, Update 1. I knew precisely where to begin as soon as I made the decision to discipline Amanda. I entered her room and started painstakingly cataloging every item of clothes in her closet while she was out with her friends. Because of her fashion obsession, Amanda's wardrobe was crammed with high-end clothing, accessories, and shoes that she had shown off on social media. I was going to start with the one she liked the most, not just sell her stuff. I started by listing her collection of luxury handbags. After months of saving money to purchase those bags, she neglected them in favor of her latest fashion fad. I created fictitious profiles on several websites and used different email addresses to make sure she couldn't link the transactions to me. In order to maintain secrecy, I set the prices of the products such that they are both attractively low enough to sell fast and high enough to make her feel hurt when she finds out. Days later, the sales began to come in. The first to go was her limited edition purse. A pair of boots that she had only worn twice came next. For my own peace of mind, I kept a record of every transaction and receipt as I meticulously wrapped and delivered each item. At first, Amanda didn't see anything. It wasn't surprising that she didn't notice her favorite things were going missing because her room was so disorganized that even I had trouble getting around her floor drop. However, one morning I heard her moaning about not being able to find her favorite clothing while she was hurriedly searching through her closet. As she ran around her room, I remained silent and pretended to be preoccupied with my meal. When she eventually came up to me, I adopted her previous contemptuous demeanor. I pretended to be uninformed and informed her that she was most likely simply misplacing items. "You've been really busy lately," I remarked nonchalantly. "Perhaps you dropped them off at a friend's place." Despite her apparent frustration, she didn't ask any more questions. I sold Amanda's clothes and made about $1,000 over the course of the following 2 weeks. I put the funds aside for my certification course and moved them into a hidden savings account. It was like getting back some of what Amanda had stolen from me as I saw the balance increase. It was already too late when Amanda saw that her clothes were going missing. One evening, she barged into the kitchen and accused me of undermining her. I remained calm and asked her why she had been so concerned about a few lost items, but she hadn't been concerned about the donation of my clothes. She continued to make excuses about how she required her clothing for social gatherings and work, but she had no response. Someone who had rejected my worries over losing thousands of dollars worth of work uniforms was now going crazy about a few lost outfits, demonstrating her hypocrisy. I refused to acknowledge anything, even though it was nearly absurd. Amanda made the decision to phone our extended relatives in order to escalate the issue, telling everyone that I was wrecking her life out of spite. She portrayed herself as the victim. The family was split apart. Some of our family members supported me, arguing that my actions were justifiable in light of Amanda's actions. Others said that I had gone too far and that I ought to have moved on to get my thoughts straight. I posted about the issue anonymously on Reddit. The reaction was tremendous. I received hundreds of responses that supported my conduct and urged me to maintain my position. I gained the insight I needed to continue after hearing other people's experiences dealing with entitled family members. Amanda, meanwhile, was in full-blown panic mode. In an attempt to locate her missing clothing, she began phoning donation locations. She found nothing, of course. She was obviously feeling the effects of the tension by the time she realized her efforts were in vain. Her Instagram posts decreased in frequency, and she began to miss her part-time shifts. No more pictures of her favorite businesses or outfits of the day. It was clear that she was recycling old clothing when she posted, something she used to criticize others for. Her pals, who had always been in her fashionable social circle, also appeared to take note. They gradually ceased leaving comments on her articles, and Amanda started to distance herself from the past. It was somehow wonderful to watch her face the repercussions of her actions. However, I knew this was not the end. I could tell Amanda was preparing her next move since she wasn't the kind to back down lightly. Nevertheless, I was not going to give the money back or admit my guilt. There were repercussions for her conduct, and this was the only way I could help her recognize that. Knowing that the next encounter was imminent, I kept one step ahead for the time being. Amanda wasn't going to let things go in the second update. It was to be anticipated. She changed her strategy after pouting and searching donation centers for her missing clothes for days. She threatened to sell what was left of my possessions when she approached me in the hallway one evening. She pretended to be challenging me to stop her by glancing at my work laptop and other things I kept visible. I didn't hold out for her to do it. After work the next day, I went to a hardware shop and got a sturdy lock for my bedroom door. I installed it as soon as I came home, verifying that it was secure by checking the screws twice. I placed my valuables, devices, critical papers, and even some of my last clothes in a lockable storage container. I kept it in my room's corner. Amanda was clearly frustrated. She angrily complained that I was being foolish as she attempted to jiggle the new lock. When she understood that I would not participate, she slammed her door and stomped away. That weekend, the tension between us reached a breaking point. Amanda sobbed and screamed about how I had destroyed her life. She blamed me for everything, even her falling out with friends, her difficult finances, and her lost clothes. She vented to anybody who would listen for hours on the phone, but it didn't seem like she got the sympathy she was hoping for. Once enthusiastic about her every Instagram post, her pals were suddenly avoiding her. Amanda became less of a mainstay in her social group as a result of her incapacity to maintain her typically stylish persona. She claimed she couldn't stand seeing her coworkers in her dull, repurposed clothes, so she started skipping work shifts. Before time, our extended family became interested. Amanda demanded that we hold a family meeting in order to address the poisonous atmosphere in the home. Curious to see how she would spin the narrative, I consented to go. The gathering, which took place at our aunt's house, swiftly turned chaotic. Amanda played the victim, emphasizing how I had sold her clothes out of retaliation. When I brought it up, she deliberately omitted the bit about how she gave away my clothes without asking. She sidestepped the question by claiming that because she had done it for charity, it was quite different. There was a flurry of accusations and shouted voices. Amanda doubled down instead of offering an apology or even acknowledging what she had done. While some family members supported her, claiming that I had gone too far, others stood up for me, claiming that Amanda had been the first to cross the line. We exited the conference in worse shape than when we started since no resolution had been achieved. In the weeks that followed, Amanda's financial difficulties were increasingly evident as her part-time salary was depleted and she was unable to buy new clothes. She began taking clothing from her pals. They first complied, but as Amanda's reputation for being entitled increased, the offers stopped coming in. One evening, she came home dressed in an obviously ill-fitting garment. She was trying desperately to recover control, and her shame was visible on her face. Amanda threatened to take legal action. She asked that I return the money I had earned from selling her things, claiming she may prosecute me for theft. The threat didn't seem real to me. I meticulously documented every transaction in case the matter got traction online, and she had no proof to support her accusations. Thousands of people responded to my subsequent Reddit update with suggestions and encouragement. While some advised me to set more stringent limits going ahead, others urged me to maintain my composure and avoid allowing guilt to influence my decisions. Their statements strengthened my determination. Meanwhile, Amanda attempted a different strategy. She began to mention her parents, claiming they would be unhappy with my treatment of her. Despite being a low blow, it didn't have the impact she had planned. I was certain that our parents would have wanted us to respect one another's limits, something Amanda had not done from the beginning. During this time, I was surprised to receive a message from a distant cousin. After learning about the drama, she volunteered to support Amanda, even going so far as to say she could assist if she decided to take legal action. Her reply served as a reminder that Amanda's story had not convinced every member of the family. Amanda attempted asking more individuals for assistance as her desperation increased, but she was turned down. Burning so many bridges made it difficult to borrow clothing, cash, or sympathy. I refused to back down in the face of mounting anxiety. There was no way to apologize or return the money, not when Amanda had not shown regret for her actions. Every action I had done was a premeditated reaction to her total disrespect for my personal space. Clothes were no longer the only issue. It was about defending myself and letting Amanda know that no matter how much pressure she attempted to put on me, her actions had repercussions. I refused to let her get away with it. Even though there was still a lot of repercussions, I was prepared for whatever happened next. Update 3. Shortly after her family meeting and threats didn't work out, Amanda reached her lowest point, lacking the funds to replenish her typical resources and clothes. Weary, she began attending events and hand-me-downs that were ill-fitting and mismatched. She was no longer able to borrow from friends. Her demands were graciously turned down or ignored. Her social media sites, which were previously flooded with pictures of stylish outfits, were unusually silent. There weren't many comments when she did post. It was obvious that her friends no longer cared as much about her life as they once did. At this point, I made the decision to make good use of the money I had made from selling her clothes. I paid the full cost of the professional certification course by enrolling in it with the money I had been saving. It was a little but gratifying triumph. I didn't show it off or tell Amanda about it. Knowing that the money had been recovered in a meaningful way, I just moved on to the next phase of my career. But Amanda wasn't done making a scene. She claimed that I had abused her and destroyed her life in a lengthy, emotional tirade that she posted on social media one evening. She presented herself as a victim, saying that I had abandoned her and turned her into a laughing figure among her friends. Her pals took notice of the message, but it didn't take long for others to piece together the whole narrative. Some of Amanda's friends who had previously supported her started leaving comments with their own thoughts. Once screenshots of my earlier Reddit posts started making the rounds. When they discovered what she had done to my clothing, some even unfollowed her. The reaction was quick. People criticized her for her conceit and asked how she could blame someone after causing the whole issue. Our extended family was also not pleased with her actions. At first, several family members had stood up for her, but they were driven away by her public outburst and reluctance to take accountability. Some even apologized to me in private for questioning my version of events. One uncle informed me that unless Amanda learned how to be an adult, he was severing his relationship with her. We grew more tense until Amanda made a decision that nobody was startled by. She left home. She says she couldn't endure being insulted and treated disrespectfully all the time. Instead of arguing, I assisted her in packing and made sure she only took items that truly belonged to her. She was able to rent a modest room from a coworker, but it was obvious that her new living arrangement wasn't as cozy as she was accustomed to. The house seemed different once she was gone. For the first time in months, the tension, the incessant disputes, and the passive-aggressive comments vanished. I could really unwind when I got home from work. I reclaimed the space by thoroughly cleaning and organizing it over the course of the following few weeks. Shortly after she moved out, Amanda apologized, but it wasn't what I'd hoped for. She claims she never intended to hurt me and blames her actions on stress in a text message. It didn't seem like a sincere effort to put things right. Rather, it felt more like an excuse. I replied in a tactful but firm manner that I couldn't make amends with her until she fully accepted responsibility for her actions. Amidst all of this, an unforeseen chance presented itself. I got in touch with one of the donation centers I contacted while looking for my clothes. They wanted to work with me on an awareness campaign about setting boundaries and making deliberate donations after seeing my Reddit posts. Although it felt unreal, I consented to assist, offering advice and insights for their social media promotion. Amanda, S financial difficulties persisted in the interim. In an attempt to make ends meet, she took on extra shifts at work, but her part-time pay was insufficient to support her spending patterns. She began borrowing clothes from coworkers instead of purchasing new ones, which only fueled rumors about her. I discovered that I was adopting a more straightforward way of living as my life calmed down. I didn't feel the need to hang on to things because I was afraid they would be stolen or broken now that Amanda was gone. I gave away some things I didn't need and concentrated on making the area feel serene and well-organized. It wasn't just about minimalism. It was about valuing respect and boundaries over material possessions. Amanda eventually started therapy. A mutual family member mentioned it to me, saying she was trying to work through her entitlement issues and unresolved grief over our parents' deaths. While I was glad to hear she was taking steps to improve herself, I wasn't ready to let my guard down just yet. Change takes time, and I wanted to see if her efforts were genuine. As for me, my story gained traction online. My Reddit updates turned into a bit of a saga, with users regularly asking for updates and offering support. Some even joked about turning it into a book or movie. It was strange being thrust into the spotlight, but the overwhelming positivity reminded me that I wasn't alone in my experiences. Looking back, the fallout taught me a lot about boundaries, accountability, and the importance of standing up for myself. Amanda and I may never fully repair our relationship, but I've learned that family doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and let people face the consequences of their actions. Update: for a few weeks after Amanda moved out, I started hearing whispers from family members about her latest steps. Apparently, she'd started therapy. My cousin mentioned it in passing, saying Amanda was trying to work on her entitlement and boundary issues. It seemed like a positive move, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't ready to trust her intentions. Then Amanda reached out directly. She texted me asking to meet in person to clear the air. I stared at the message for a while before replying. After months of chaos, it felt too soon to face her. I wasn't convinced she was ready to take accountability, and I didn't want to walk into another round of excuses or deflections. But the family had other ideas. Within days, I started getting calls and messages urging me to reconcile with Amanda. Family is all we have, they reminded me repeatedly. It was exhausting. The pressure was intense, but I stood my ground. I told them I'd only need Amanda if she admitted fault and offered a genuine apology. Otherwise, there was no point. Eventually, Amanda agreed to my terms and we scheduled a meeting. She showed up late, looking nervous and slightly disheveled. It was clear this wasn't easy for her. When we sat down, she started with a tearful apology, saying she regretted everything she'd done. For the first time, she seemed genuinely remorseful. I didn't let her off the hook, though. I pressed her to explain why she thought it was okay to donate my clothes without asking. She hesitated, but finally admitted that she'd seen it as a way to teach me a lesson. She thought I had so much compared to her and believed I wouldn't miss the clothes. Hearing her justification made my anger resurface. It was exactly the entitled mindset that had caused all this in the first place. Her apology might have been heartfelt, but her reasoning confirmed that I'd been right to stand my ground. Then Amanda dropped another bombshell. She asked if she could move back into the house temporarily, citing financial struggles. She claimed she couldn't afford her current rent and needed some time to get back on her feet. I didn't hesitate to respond. I told her firmly that she needed to prove she truly changed before I could trust her again. Moving back in wasn't an option. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I had to prioritize my peace and boundaries. Amanda seemed taken aback, but she didn't argue. Instead, she opened up about her therapy sessions, saying they'd helped her see how much of her behavior stemmed from unresolved grief over our parents' deaths. She talked about how she'd use material things to cope, and how that mindset had fueled her entitlement. While I could empathize with her grief, I couldn't excuse her actions. I told her as much, making it clear that therapy was a good step, but not a free pass for what she'd done. After the meeting, I turned to Reddit for advice. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, encouraging me to maintain my boundaries. Many users reminded me that guilt shouldn't override self-respect, and that I wasn't obligated to let Amanda back into my life on her terms. In the weeks that followed, Amanda started taking solid efforts to change her life around. She revealed to the family that she was cutting back on expenditures and had obtained a second job to recover financially. Her social media messages switched from attention-seeking rants to updates on her success in therapy and job. It was a start, but I kept my distance. I admired her efforts, but I wasn't ready to totally welcome her back into my life. I'd learned the hard way that trust takes time to restore, and I wasn't going to rush the process. Despite everything, I found myself pondering on our shared loss. Losing our parents had been a traumatic blow, and I realized I repressed my own sentiments to focus on survival. But grieving didn't excuse poor conduct, and it certainly didn't explain breaking someone else's limits. As for my personal journey, I continued to focus on constructing a life that offered me peace. I make a point to avoid clutter and adopt a simple lifestyle. It wasn't about the items I possessed, but about appreciating respect and harmony in my home. Amanda and I continued in sporadic touch, sharing information through family members or quick texts. She looked to be making actual progress, but I remained wary. I wasn't in a rush to push a relationship that wasn't ready to mend, and it would take time to trust her again. I've decided to concentrate on myself, my objectives, and the knowledge I've gained from this experience for the time being. Setting limits is not only crucial, but also vital. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others around you is to stand your ground. Amanda made surprisingly good growth during the next 6 months, according to Update 5. She resumed her treatment and began repairing her relationships with the relatives she had alienated throughout her downward spiral. She approached those she had harmed slowly but methodically, expressing her regret. With Amanda actively trying to mend such ties, family get-togethers were less stressful. In the meantime, I reached a significant personal milestone. I used the money I made from selling Amanda's clothes to pay for the professional certification course I had taken. It was more than just a professional advancement. It served as confirmation of all the effort I had made to take back my life. After obtaining the certification, I was able to land a better-paying position with more perks and better hours. In a long time, for the first time, I started to consider the trips, investments, and other goals I had put off for years. Amanda surprised me with a handwritten note at about the same time. She talked candidly about how treatment had altered her viewpoint. She acknowledged that she had realized the extent of the harm she had caused and how entitled her actions had been. She also thanked me for being stern, stating that it made her face the repercussions of her actions. Even if the letter seemed sincere, I wasn't prepared to fully lower my defenses. I valued her development. However, trust takes time to recover. I made the decision to set limits while being receptive to her development. Amanda kept her life under control. She started handling her money more sensibly after moving into a small flat with a roommate. She was living within her means for the first time, making timely bill payments and even putting money aside. The Amanda who couldn't help but indulge in every new fad was a far cry from that. After a while, we began communicating more often. We went to family gatherings and enjoyed a few coffee dates without the conflict that had long characterized our relationship. I made it apparent that my property and place were off limits until specifically shared, setting clear guidelines for any future encounters. I had some optimism that Amanda was actually changing since she respected these terms. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Amanda wrote a long social media message in which she apologized publicly. She expressed how treatment had aided in her personal development and accepted full responsibility for her acts. She didn't make explanations or present herself as a victim. Rather, she expressed thanks for the lessons she had learned and admitted the damage she had caused. Our friends and relatives were stunned by the article, and many of them sent me encouraging messages. Reddit's reaction to my post on Amanda's development was a mixture of concern and optimism. The majority of users praised her development, but they also cautioned me to be careful about setting limits. Their counsel was in line with what I already knew. I was hesitant, yet hopeful. Amanda also showed kindness in an unexpected way. She sorted through the rest of her clothes and gave a few to the same charity where she had placed my stuff. It seemed like a symbolic act that demonstrated her will to put things right. Amanda and I made the decision to throw a little family dinner shortly after . It served as a ceasefire signal and a demonstration to the family that we were both trying to patch things up. The tension that had previously characterized our exchanges was replaced by stories and laughing, and the evening proceeded without incident. It's becoming late at night. Amanda took me by surprise once more. She promised to reimburse me a portion of the proceeds from the sale of her clothing. Telling her that the lesson she had learned was worth more than any cash, I rejected. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, there was no tension between us, just mutual understanding, when she smiled. As I thought back on all that had transpired, I became aware of how much we had learned from the experience. For Amanda, it served as a lesson in responsibility and deference to authority. It served as a reminder to me of how crucial it is to maintain my integrity and avoid allowing guilt to influence my decisions. I thanked everyone who has supported and followed the adventure as I concluded my last Reddit post. It was gratifying to see how many others connected with the lessons we learned, and sharing the tale online had been an unexpected source of support and affirmation. In the center of everything, I learned from this experience that even the most messy disagreements may result in progress if both parties are prepared to own up to their mistakes and make the effort to improve.